So this presentation is called Managing Your Office with 365 Best Practices. We've done this a couple of times. Kind of like the big question that I want to start off with is like, why should you care about this presentation besides that you have to get COE credit for it and you'll get it by sitting here? And really, to answer that, I'm going to make an assumption here, and I know there's still some WordPerfect users out there. But I know that most attorneys are using Microsoft Word, they're using Outlook, they're using Excel, and they're using PowerPoint. And I'm not, if you're a Windows user or you're a Mac user, there's a version of Office out for the Mac. There's also the ability to run parallels and run the whole version. So I'm just going to make that assumption out right now. And then there's the other thing is that most people have a tablet, and maybe they want to be able to edit documents on it. So that's why we're going to start talking about Microsoft Office 365. I know a lot of Google Apps, Gmail users that still have a Microsoft 365 account. So email is one part of 365, and we're going to talk about that, but there's a lot of other stuff. So I'm going to make the assumption right now, let's just say that you have 5 computers. You've got a computer at your house, you've got 3 computers at work, and then maybe you have a laptop. I mean, that could be for different staff. That could be for a lot of different people. And you want to get 5 copies of Microsoft Office. Okay? So you walk into Best Buy, and you're paying $2,000 plus tax. That's how much it costs. It's $399 to buy Microsoft Office. All right? If you use Microsoft Office through 365, and that's still downloading it onto your computer, it's $12 a month. Okay? So right there, hopefully, if you have to buy Office, you can get it so much cheaper through Microsoft 365. And, this isn't an altruistic, sort of thing from Microsoft. Again, everyone is moving to this subscription model. Adobe's doing it. Other companies are doing it. Software companies, so you're going to start seeing this. But again, if you can take nothing else from this presentation, if you have to buy Word for your Mac or for your Windows computer, and then you look at it and like, okay, we're going to spend, $399, or we're just going to buy Word and it's $200, realize that you could rent it for $12 a month, okay? And it really is $7 a month, and we'll explain that in this presentation. But I think that's why this can be really, really important, and I think you're going to see a trend that more and more attorneys are going to move to Office 365. And Microsoft has really been positioning themselves to do that.
Just what was the figure we saw? They just released 2 months ago a version for the iPad, and in 2 months, how many downloads?
22 million downloads worldwide.
Just for the iPad,
right,
in 2 months. So Microsoft's being very aggressive with this pricing to get versions out for everybody to be able to use on whatever their computer system happens to be, and the pricing's just totally aggressive. Totally.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to talk about a variety of different things. We're going to start off with, how email used to work. We won't spend a lot of time on that. We'll explain what an Exchange server is and how we would install that. We're also going to talk about, Google Apps and how that compares to Microsoft 365, how you can convert to Microsoft 365, and how you can get around the billion different plans that Microsoft has to confuse you if you're thinking about actually getting it, and just some tips and tricks.
So just to be clear, what we're talking about here with Office 365 is the basic Office applications, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook, the email. So we're going to talk about the email first.
All right, so what I'm going to do is a quick comparison to what we call snail mail. So that's actually if you wrote a letter out, put it in an envelope, and put a stamp on it. And we're going to compare that to electronic mail. So that's the how email works portion. So if you're going to use snail mail, which we all still do, we're going to use the U.S. Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, or DHL. We have a couple of options or carriers to get our mail out. Same thing in the electronic environment. So if you want to send an email out, you can choose your service. You could be using Gmail. You could be using Yahoo. You could be using your internet service provider like Cox. Hopefully you're not using AOL, but you could use that. You could have an Exchange server in your office. You could be using Hotmail, or you could be using Office 365. So you've got some choices on how to send email out. Okay, so how does that email get sent? So, or how does that mail get sent? So, it could go on an airplane, it could go on a truck, or your postal guy could just drop it off in your mailbox. So
I always laugh when I see this picture and have to give the caveat, unless you live in New Orleans and it's Saturday, in which case that bottom picture does not apply. The government announced, several months ago they were considering dropping Saturday delivery for mail, and the big joke in New Orleans was, how would we tell the difference?
So on the electronic side of things, there's really three ways that you're getting mail. Okay, you're getting some, and I'm going to explain all these.
This is a little geek alert here. We're going to get a little bit geeky.
But I think this is important, especially the whole POP3. So you're going to use something called POP3, IMAP, or Exchange. And if you've ever set up email on your phone, you're kind of maybe familiar with this because it'll ask you what is the POP address or what is the IMAP address. And then
anybody ever had to do this?
Yeah.
Set up the email on your iPhone.
Okay.
It says, do you have a POP3 account? You go, I don't know. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Well, so POP3 is the crappiest of all the delivery methods and really is being phased out, okay? So POP3, and this is what we all used to use, so you would install this on a computer and you say, like, okay, I'm using a POP3, and so what that basically means is that there's a server here that has all your email and here's your computer. And POP3, it's taking all of the email and throwing it on the computer and removing it from the server, okay? So this worked at first, and then you got a smartphone, and then maybe you had a computer at home, and then you were like, well, if I read an email on my phone and I move it to this folder, I just want that to happen. I don't want to have to redo that when I get back to my office, or I don't want, if my computer just blows up, I have no backup of my email. And there are a couple of ways of getting around that, but again, POP3, do you see that being used anymore in any fashion?
Folks who've had systems for a while and now are getting smartphones, I just had to help somebody convert for that very reason. Well, if I check my email on my smartphone, it's not showing, then it doesn't show up on my desktop, or vice versa. They're not synchronized. So those are the older systems. So I still see every now and then, yeah. But yeah, more and more rare.
Right. IMAP. So if you have email through your cable provider, it's most likely IMAP. If you have email through Google, so Gmail or Google Apps, you're using IMAP. IMAP works very well because it keeps all the data on the server, which allows it to synchronize between any devices. So if you are on your iPhone and you move an email to a folder, it moves it back on the server and throws it out to all the other devices. So it's synchronized and backed up. And then Exchange, which is Microsoft's proprietary software, which basically does the same thing as IMAP. With Exchange, you also have like the calendar synchronization, so I can share my calendar out with everyone in my office. So if I'm in Outlook, I can see everyone's calendar and I can see what they're doing today. So you get that sharing ability. But these are the three ways that email is being sent from either your computer or your phone. Okay, so if you receive mail, usually it shows up on your doorstep or in a mailbox. If you receive email, it's going to show up in Outlook. It's going to show up in Mac Mail. It's going to show up using the Gmail interface, Thunderbird, or it's going to show up on your smartphone. So these are all kind of like mailboxes. I include this in here, and I don't want to confuse anyone, but if you are using Google Apps, okay, or Gmail, you can hook that up to Outlook. Outlook is really a mailbox, that's sitting outside your house. That's what it is. So it can be hooked up to any service there. All right, so that's just the basic kind of explanation of how email works. Now we're going to talk about how Exchange used to work. And really from 2001 to around 2006, I installed Exchange servers in someone's office. And you have to realize that these options did not exist, before then. So people wanted Exchange servers in their office. So let's say I started up my own law firm, and it was the Bayer Law Firm, and I got the domain name BayerLawFirm.com. I could get this Exchange server. I could share my calendars with all my users, and I had all these benefits of using Exchange. I wasn't using POP3 anymore, but I had to put this in my office. And so this is what we used to do. And so there were, I think, really 5 big problems with Exchange besides all the benefits. So again, this little box here would be the traditional network. So this would be your Exchange server, and these would be all your computers hooked up to it.
So remember the network drawing we had before, sharing documents on one network. Same thing for your email. You'd have a separate server called the Exchange server that everybody would connect to through those switches. That's why you had to have plugs, more than one plug often for other people. The Outlook Exchange server would be its own box, independent of everything else on the network.
All right, so the first problem is viruses. And I had this happen to a couple of clients. So you have this Exchange server at your office, and it's in a closet somewhere, and you've got like 6 or 7 computers at your office, okay? And what happens is someone is downloading movies on like some sort of sharing site, they're looking at whatever, and they get a virus, okay? And so a lot of what these viruses do, a lot of these are criminal enterprises. They're not just kids fooling around. And what they do is they take over your computer and they start sending spam out all over the world. So your computer is becoming a spam bot that's just sending the spam out. So there were organizations created to find out who are the spammers, okay? And so they traced all the spam email back, and they're like, oh, well, it's coming from this office in Houma, Louisiana, and this IP address. So we're just going to block that from being able to send out email. So I would get a phone call from an attorney, and they'd be like, hey, no one's getting any of the email we're sending. And I'd be like, okay. So then, and I look on, like, well, the Exchange server's up. So then I would go to this. There was a website you would go to, and it would be like, oh, yeah, you're listed as a spammer now in the international spam directory. So we would have to do 2 things. We would have to find the computer, and this got more problematic if there were like 20 computers there, and we would have to, remove the virus. And honestly, the best way to do that was just to wipe the whole machine, because some of these viruses are really hard to remove. And then we would have to apply to get removed as a spammer. So I'd have to fill out this form and be like, we're not a spammer, we got a virus. And then we would have to wait 2 or 3 days. And I'd have to tell it to an attorney, okay, you might be able to send email again in 2 or 3 days. So the virus issue was a problem. The other thing I'd add to this is you would have to buy, like I said before when you asked that question, get Microsoft Security Essentials, because that's a great antivirus software. If you don't have an Exchange server, you can do that. But if you have an Exchange server, I'm like, okay, we need to buy a $1,000 antivirus program because it's got to manage the Exchange server and then all the computers. So there's that layer of cost on there as well. Okay, the other big one is, and this is what kind of got me out of having an Exchange server, if the power fails at your office and you're sitting in a Starbucks or you're looking at your phone to check your email, you're not going to get that email anymore. Doesn't matter if you have internet access. If your Exchange server doesn't have power or it doesn't have internet access, it doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter if you have internet access, you're not going to be able to get mail. And I learned this the hard way, because I was always like, I need to get hosted Exchange. This was around 2008, but I never did it. And we had an Exchange server in our office. And then Hurricane Gustav hit, and we didn't have power in our office for 2 weeks. So like day 3, I just signed up for hosted Exchange, and I've never looked back. But again, that's the big problem with having the Exchange server in your office is if you're down in your office, your email is just down. Okay, and we can just add this to this. If your server crashes, if it dies, your email is down as well. So you have a box, that Exchange server, that you need to maintain, and if it doesn't work, your email does not work. Right, so to add on to that, you have to have an IT guy. And I'm not saying you don't have to have an IT guy now, but it gets expensive to have him. He's coming in there all the time, and if he's doing a good job, he's got to spend time, and he's got to cost you money to maintain that Exchange server. So you're having someone that is dealing with this all the time, and then we'll just throw this on here is the cost. Look, this was good money for me. If you wanted an Exchange server, I would say, okay, well, so Dell is going to get $3,000 for a server. It's going to cost me about $2,500 to set the whole thing up, so that's money coming into my pocket. And then we got to buy the antivirus software, and then maintenance. Well, I got to maintain this thing, so our companies we're probably going to spend around $1,000 to $1,500 a year maintaining this server. So it was expensive. You know what? Why do people? We're sitting there now. We're looking at 365. We're talking $5 and $12 a month. There were no other options. Like if you wanted to have email and you wanted to have this capability, and you wanted to have what they called push synchronization, so your secretary adds a calendar at your office and like it shows up on your phone, it's just added there automatically. You had to have Exchange to do this, and that's why people got it. It just had a lot of problems. And so again, I'm going to say that I have never heard since 2010, 2011 of anyone buying an Exchange server and putting in their office. And we do a lot of in-house Exchange to hosted Microsoft 365 migrations. I've never seen it done the other way around, where someone's like, I want to buy an Exchange server, can you move me off this cloud-based solution? So that's definitely the trend. The only exception I would say is that if you were in a company with like 500 people, well then you have a huge IT department and there might be special reason and you've got the people there to maintain that Exchange server. That would be the only reason I could still see someone having one. All right, so that's how Exchange used to work, and now I want to talk about like how do we get to where we are now, like the move to the cloud. All right, the first thing is in 2004, Google, and it was like a big deal, and it was like, oh, did you get an invitation from Google to get Gmail? And then like someone could give someone else. Google does a good job of rolling it out there. So, and to be honest, I don't know why, but there is prejudice against email addresses. So if you sent me an AOL email, like I saw it was from Craig at AOL.com, I'd be like, this person doesn't know what they're doing. If you sent me a Craig at Gmail, I'd be like, okay, like that's somehow acceptable. I don't know why, but that's the general undercurrent, isn't that? Yeah. That you hear about. So Gmail came out in 2004, and then shortly after, Google Apps came out. And Google Apps is the paid version of Gmail. It's about $5 an email address a month. And so if I have BayerLawFirm.com, I can buy Google Apps, and I can hook that together so I can send emails out from BayerLawFirm.com. I'm using the Gmail interface. I can share calendar. I can share contacts. So Google came out with this, okay? And it was cheap. So now people had an option. So I could give them a proposal for $7,000, or they could get like one for $500 and then $5 an email address a month. Well, where did they go to? Then the other thing that happened was, there was some geeky guys got together and they're like, well, look, it's really expensive and there's a lot of problems with you having your Exchange server in your office. So why don't we just get some investment and buy like 1,000 Exchange servers and host them in a data center, and we'll resell Exchange to people. And that's how I first got into hosted Exchange. So after Gustav hit, that was 2008, there was no Microsoft 365. So I used this company called Intermedia. And so Intermedia is buying Microsoft Exchange from Microsoft and then reselling it to me. And they were charging me between $12 and $15 a month per email address. But it worked, and it was a lot cheaper than having my own Exchange server. AppRiver did this. OwnWebNow did this as well. These companies still exist, and they still do it. Although I have to believe they might be in a little financial trouble now, because Microsoft owns the Exchange. They created Exchange. They own the software, so they don't have to buy it from themselves. So they can really undercut all these providers. All right, and so then in 2011, first Microsoft 365 came out, but it wasn't called Microsoft 365 because Microsoft likes to make everything difficult and rebrand the same services every 3 years, so then I have to go change all the marketing material and it costs money. I don't know. It's just a pet peeve of mine that Microsoft always changes stuff. But it was originally called BPOS, so I guess that's probably why they changed it, because it's a horrible name. So it came out with BPOS, and really I signed up for that. I know you signed up for it because it was from Microsoft and it was fairly cheap. And then they changed it to Microsoft 365. So then Microsoft started selling to people their own Exchange service.
And I'll say one of the reasons, or a big reason, other than the technical side and the ease, it looked exactly like my Exchange email. I'd been using Exchange when they brought this out. Very, very smart. The interface looked exactly the same. If you looked at the screen, you would have no idea that you were using their cloud-based service as opposed to having it on your own server. So for me to switch programs,
you wouldn't know.
From the point of view of my ability to use it And to work with it, there was no disruption whatsoever.
All right, so we have to go. This is kind of our joke. So the Surface tablet just came out. Like on Monday they released, the Surface, or Tuesday they released. Microsoft's got a new tablet. So Apple releases a tablet and they've got a tablet. There's like one model to buy. Microsoft can never do that. So they have to have like 5 models to choose from. And then it's just like, okay, which one do I choose? I don't understand any of this. Well, it's the same thing with 365. And even for people like us, when we go onto the website to sign up for it,
It's okay.
I have to take a deep breath and realize that I'm going to have 100 options to choose from, which is the correct one. We'll talk about it. There's really 3 plans I would look at if I were going to Microsoft 365. Okay, here's plan 1. And it's taking 2 assumptions: that you already own Office, so you just bought a computer and Office is on there, or you purchased Office, or you don't want Office, so you have a MacBook Air and you're just going to use Mac Mail and their calendaring and their to-do app, and so you don't want to have Microsoft Office at all. It's $5 an email address a month. That's pretty simple. It's plan P1, okay? You can, and anyone can right now, is you can download Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and OneNote for your iPad, okay? And you can download that and you can use that to view documents. But if you want to edit documents and you have this plan, you don't have the ability to do that, okay? And that is the confusion that I see with some of my customers is well, I'm paying for 365, so why can't I edit those documents? It's not included in this plan here. So this is just an email address. It's $5 an email address a month. Okay, plan 2, this is $12 an email address a month, and you get the entire Office suite included in there. You get the iPad, the iPhone app, you get the Android app for the actual smartphone. The Android tablet is in process right now, and so it's going to come out soon. I don't know how soon it's going to be, but you get the ability to edit documents. I mean, anyone here without even 365 can download those apps and they can use them to view. But if you want to actually edit Word on a tablet, you have to have plan 2 or 3. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote, Outlook, Access, Publisher, and Link. You get all those included in there. And here's some of the best parts about it. So before, someone would buy a new computer and they're like, well, I own Office, can you switch it to this computer? And I'm like, fine. Do you have that little serial key? No, I don't. Okay, well, you've just basically thrown $400 away, because unless you have that serial key, we can't do anything. Now, Microsoft Office is basically linked to an email address, okay? So I just have to log into the website and I say, download Office, and it downloads Office, and it licenses Office, and I can install that on 5 computers. Mac is included in there, so I can get Office 2011 on my Mac, or if I'm running Parallels, I can run the full Windows version. But
likewise, if you want to change computers, you can say I already downloaded it to one, deactivate it.
Absolutely.
Right? And then now I bought a new computer, load the new one. It just makes loading and reusing software incredibly easy.
There's no serial keys anymore, so you just don't have to deal with that. You just have to know. I mean, even if you forget your password, as long as you know what your email address is, so I'm just going to assume everyone can do that, know what your own email address is, you're going to be fine. Okay, so all you have to do is say, I forgot my password, they'll send it to you, and then you can get in there. This is the Cadillac plan, so it's $20 a user a month. I don't have anyone using this, but I just throw this in here. It's got the legal hold capability. It's got advanced storage. So let me just jump back to these 2 plans right here. Plan 1 and 2 have 25 gigabytes of storage per user, which is really unheard of now. I've been using the same exchange, same email address, and I've migrated all my data through all these things. So I'm running about 12 gigs of an email file, okay? And that's 12 years. I mean, that's about a gig a year. Other attorneys that, get all the email and never delete it, they might be bigger, but I've rarely ever seen anyone come across that 25 gig threshold. I mean, that's a huge amount of storage that's included. On these old plans, like the intermediate when we had it, we had 2 gigs. to use. So the 25 should be okay, but if it's not, you can get Plan 3 and get more storage, and they've got some sort of voicemail in there as well. So again, well, let's just jump to this. So mix and match. So let's just say that you decide I want to get Microsoft 365. I've got 5 computers. 2 of them already have Office on them. So I can just get the $5 plan for them, and then I can get the $12 plan for the other 3. So you can mix and match the plans on their website. That's fairly easy to do. Again, I want to just jump back to this whole point here, is that if you get Office from 365, you can install it on 5 computers, okay? If you buy Office from the store, you can install it on 1 computer, and it costs $400. So, I mean, there's the payoff right there, is this is so much cheaper to do. All right, so we're going to jump back because we talked about some of these compliance issues before. But if you go to trustoffice365.com, and I'm really not even talking about any sort of ethics here, I'm talking more about if you are dealing with medical records, then you have to follow HIPAA, like Microsoft is HIPAA compliant. If you go to Dropbox.com and look at their terms of service, they are not HIPAA compliant. Microsoft, and you can speak more to this, Tom, about the whole, because I know you deal with this more than I, but Microsoft pretty much has like all the compliances, it's got them all. And if you know there's something that you need, you can check it out there.
Yeah, I think this is just a background of Microsoft working in the business environment, selling Office for years to businesses. So they've made sure they comply with not just HIPAA, but a lot of other federal and state regulations regarding storage of documents. So you have that assurance built in. And also, if you're talking to your clients, you can give that assurance to your clients.
Right, and so this is the whole thing on choosing this product. Other cloud providers, like we have the checklist, 5 things. This meets all of them, easily meets all of them. Again, I'm not here to bash Google Apps. I know a lot of attorneys use it. I use Google Apps. Google Apps was not HIPAA compliant till October of 2013. So it was not compliant at all. Now, Gmail is definitely not HIPAA compliant. So you just have a Gmail address, you're violating HIPAA if you're emailing any sort of medical records on there. If you have the Google Apps, they are now HIPAA compliant, but their HIPAA compliance is very weak. When I give this seminar, every once in a while, an attorney will come to me and be like, exactly. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand this. I'm just putting up here what the comparisons are. I think the big thing is the breach notification. So basically Google has no time commitment to notify you if there's been any sort of breach of data, whereas Microsoft has 30 days, but they're going to do it as soon as possible. But they have to do it within 30 days. And then Google's HIPAA compliance, so their business associate agreement, expires on June 1st of 2015. So what happens after that? Are they going to still be HIPAA compliant, or they're going to decide not to be anymore?
Well, I think they'll continue with it. Again, I think this is a reflection of they're coming from a consumer background, not so much business oriented, and not considering a lot of this. I think they'll get better, not weaker, but it's just a concern.
Well, and then the other thing here is look at the included services. So not all of Google Apps is HIPAA compliant. So you're supposed to disable the stuff that isn't. Where pretty much all of Office 365 is HIPAA compliant.
Yep.
All right, so the other thing is the uptime. So we kind of bashed having an Exchange server in your office because it could be down a lot. Is Office 365 up more than having a server in your office? The answer is yes. The percent numbers they give here, all cloud-based computing does this. So we were up 99.97%. What does that actually mean? I've been using this product since it came out in 2011, and my email has gone down twice. So, because you've been using it the same amount of time, you can speak to it. So,
both times on a Friday afternoon.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
So, which was a little better than having it Monday morning for about 1 to 2 hours, and in that time, I could not send or receive email. Okay, and that's it. So I can say 4 hours since 2011. So for 3 years, I've actually had an issue with email, which was much better than having email in your office. The other thing that I would add to this is if you're going to use Microsoft 365, get a Yahoo email address or a Gmail address as a backup, so at least you can email people saying, hey, we're having a problem with their email right now. It's Microsoft Office 365, but it'll be up soon, but use this email address if you have to.
Yeah, I have a backup Gmail. Also, most cable companies, if you're getting your internet access through cable, they'll give you an email address as well. So just sign up for one of the email addresses with the cable provider.
But any comparison of running Office 365 to having email in your office, 365 wins all the time. All right, so if you have another service, how can you migrate to 365, and what can you migrate to 365? I know about this because I've done the whole migration. And it's pretty much anything, but I'll kind of explain the migration process. So the first question is, do you need to hire someone to do this? Maybe, but you might be able to do it yourself. We're going to explain how you actually migrate. I will add this, that everyone is doing 365 migrations. Everyone is doing them. So GoDaddy is doing 365 migrations. AT&T, does them. All the IT people, all the people in my software space do them. The reason that I do them is because 365 integrates with stuff. So if you have like Amicus Attorney or Time Matters, I can integrate your email if you have 365. So that's the whole reason our company started doing this, because we try to stay out of that IT world. But we're going to go through a checklist of what you have to do to migrate, and if you're comfortable with that, you might be able to do this yourself. Okay, so what does not migrate? There's three things, but we're going to show you how to get around them. So shared folders. So for example, if you have your calendar and you've shared it out with your secretary, if you do a 365 migration, you're going to have to spend the 20 seconds resharing that again, because you just can't migrate those shares. The other two things are an NK2 file and categories. So let me explain what that means. So have you ever been in Outlook and you start typing an email to someone? Like I'm going to email Dave. I type in DAV and the rest of his name fills out. Okay. This is not pulling from a contact card. What happens is when you first install Outlook and you start sending email, Outlook tracks every email you sent, and it puts it basically almost like in an Excel file on your computer. And so it goes back to this list to send out email. So again, hopefully you put people's email addresses in a contact, but if you haven't done that, and you migrate to 365 and you start typing DAV, nothing's going to appear. And I've had this happen before where clients have been like, well, we can't send email anymore because we don't have any contacts. Like, what are you talking about? You got like 1,000 contacts. They're like, no, we don't have it when it fills out. So you can actually migrate the NK2 file, but you have to do it on every desktop. So you go in, you take the file from its location. You can just Google migrate an NK2 file. You take the file and then you re-import it, and then you have this functionality. It's not that important to me, but I've realized that it's important to a lot of attorneys to actually do this. The other thing, and least likely, is if you use categories at all. So I have every contact to do and email, like every contact to do and calendar appointment, I have a category on it because I just like using categories to organize. When you first migrate over, the categories are not there. If you simply right-click in Outlook over your name, because that'll be your Exchange address, you choose Upgrade to Color Categories, and all the categories come back.
But you only have to do that once.
Once per computer. Yeah, and the categories immediately, it'll say repopulating categories, and then they come back there.
Okay.
So the checklist to do a migration. Number one seems really easy, but it's not. So if you registered BayerLawFirm.com, you use some sort of domain register to do that. Most likely GoDaddy. There's a couple other ones too. You have to be able to log into this domain register, because what you're doing is you're pointing the MX record, which is a mail record, somewhere else. It's almost funny, but like no one ever knows what this is because you registered your domain name 6 years ago, you set it to charge it to your American Express, and then you never look back, and then you don't remember what the username and password is. That's like the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is you had your IT guy do it and then you fired him, and then he just owns your domain name now and he's pissed off at you and he's not giving it back. you have to be able, it's like the first time before we even do a migration is like, can you give us the login credentials to get in here? And if you don't, we have to like petition GoDaddy to get them. It's very, very easy. But you have to be able to log in there. Then you need a list of people that you want to migrate, a list of email addresses. You have to go to 365, set it up, like just set up an account, and then you need a Friday to do this. So you never do a migration, and people ask, can you do this on Tuesday? No. We can only do this on Friday night because we're going to take your email down, and we cannot do it during business hours. Now, they say that it takes 72 hours for like an MX record change to propagate through DNS. Okay, that was really geeky. But they say it can take 72 hours to switch over. It takes like 10 minutes, but that's just in there in case. So I switch this thing over on Friday at like 7 p.m. or someone in my company does, and by Saturday morning, you're getting email into 365. Okay, and if there's a problem where you're not getting email, we'll just switch it back. And then we'll just try again, the next Friday. But you always do this on a Friday. You would never do this on a Thursday or something like that, because if you couldn't get everything switched over, that gives us 2 days, I think, to get everything switched over. Ideally, when I do this, and we've done a whole bunch of migrations, it takes us about 10 minutes for the email to start flowing again. Okay, so adding on, so one part of Office 365 is email, but it's not the only part. So it's getting Office installed on your computer, but there's another portion as well. It's using web apps to access Office. The best thing about this is if you don't want to get Office 365, you can still use all these web apps for free. So if you have a Microsoft Office, like a Microsoft Live account, you can use the Word web app, you can use the Excel web app, the PowerPoint, and the OneNote. And these are really, really good. I mean, they are almost like the full version of Word. So you can, like if you're on a computer that doesn't have Microsoft Word, you could log in and start working on a document, and you could create it, schedule tables, indent, change the fonts. You can do all that stuff. So you have these ability to use these web apps no matter what, even if you're not using 365. Okay. You also get with 365 OneDrive for Business. OneDrive is a competitor to Dropbox that Microsoft released. So if you pay for Dropbox right now, you have a Dropbox account. The first, you have the free version, and then you go up to the next paid version. That's $9.99 a month, and that gives you 100 gigabytes of data. Okay, if you get 365, you get OneDrive for Business included, and it gives you 1 terabyte of data, which is 10 times what Dropbox gives you, and there's no extra cost. Okay, but beware here that I use OneDrive. I don't use it for everything. I use it for some things. It is not as smooth as Dropbox. With Dropbox, there's, everything seems to work, and I never have any error messages. I've had a couple of error messages with OneDrive. I think it's getting better and better as it's out. It's newer. But the real problem I've had with it is that if a file is not named a certain way, then OneDrive has trouble importing it, and you have to change the file name. There's some tools you can use to do a mass change. Like if there's 2 periods in a file name, it won't accept it into OneDrive, which is a pain in the neck. So I slowly copy stuff over there and then clean it up, but I think OneDrive is going to get a lot better. Here's why. So if you have Office 2013, and you've ever hit save, you have this option to save to OneDrive. So Microsoft has built this in. If you are on Word on your iPad and you hit save, you have an option to save to OneDrive. If you're on the Word app in Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, you have the option to save to OneDrive. So this is built into the system so that you can actually save your documents into it. And you can, same thing with opening them, you can open your documents from there as well. So Dropbox just doesn't have that ability. You can save to a folder in Dropbox, but it's not built into the file save. Look, this is something, technology changes all the time. I think OneDrive will eventually give Dropbox a run for its money. But right now, I'm kind of testing it out. I've got like my presentations in there and stuff like that. It works the same, but it's not as easy to use as Dropbox. But it's also 10 times more space and included in the cost.
Is that a terabyte per user? Or
no, that's
for the account.
That's for the account.
Right. Okay. And Can I use it like Dropbox? Could I put something in my OneDrive and give you access to it?
Absolutely.
All right.
So you can do the whole sharing thing there.
Okay.
All right, so there's really, I'm talking about, the one thing I want to talk about is the smartphone apps. So you have your iPhone, and it has Office Mobile, or you have an Android device, and it has Office Mobile. They're kind of crappy. All right, and that's not because of the software, but are you really going to edit a document on this thing?
Yeah.
I mean, you might be able to view a document, and that works, but you're not really going to go in there and start like trying to type
Opening
on
up a spreadsheet and trying to make corrections to
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's not going to happen.
So this is included, so you get this with 365. Really just good for document review. Even though you could edit it in there, and then you could just save it into OneDrive, and it's just there. Pretty phenomenal. So again, we said 22 million copies have been downloaded in 2 months. I've used Word and Excel to change and edit documents. It's coming out for the Android tablets soon. Don't know a date, but this works extremely well. Again, it's more real estate. You know, you're holding a tablet. There's just a lot more space there, so it actually flows a lot better. And you know, if you and we didn't put this in here, but it's also available on the Windows tablets.
Right.
It's just not a lot of people have those. But available on an iPad. Now, you don't want to get, if you don't want to get Microsoft 365, you can still download all of these. Like, you could go and download them all today from the App Store. You just don't have the ability to edit, but you do have the ability to view. So you don't have to have a 365 account in that aspect. So you want to actually make changes to it.
Yep.
All right, so this is the last thing, and then we're going to be able to go to lunch. Link. So this is like a kind of a Lagniappe extra here. There's a couple other ones that we didn't even have time to talk about. But this is secure, HIPAA-compliant messaging, okay? So I explain this, how Link works is if you have an Office, you install Link on your computer, your assistant's computer, it's on your iPhone, it's on your Mac, it's got apps for everything, and you use this to message back and forth, okay? Now, if someone else has an Office and they have Link too, you can't message them. And that's not what this product, this is not GChat to like talk with a lot of different people. This is secure in your office, you control everything, super encrypted messaging that it's included there, that you run the link. And it's cool to send documents through it, so you're just like attach a document here and say, take a look at this. It's also integrated with everything, so it's integrated with your calendar. So if I open up Link and I see everyone that works in my office, people, like if they go to look at me right now in Link, they'll say, well, you know, it'll say unavailable. That's because I have this CLE on my Outlook calendar, so it shows me as unavailable. If I didn't have everything on the calendar, I'd be available. You can also set that as well. And Link, and I don't have time to go into this, but it has the ability to integrate with phones as well. And then there's an app for your smartphone. It has presentation capability. So I could do a presentation on it, share my screen with people, have people dial into a number. This is like a really, really good product. And again,
But internal to your office.
it is only internally. That's why it's HIPAA compliant. You know, I mean, really, this is something for your office that, again, you don't want to be using, you know, AOL Messenger,
Okay.
even the Microsoft Messenger, you want Link, and it's included in Office 365.
Great.
So, do we have any questions?
What's for lunch?
What's for lunch? Well, thank you so much. Here are our email addresses, so if you have any questions, feel free to email us. And again, thank you.
All right.